because after that, being around my family, can you listen? I'm trying to open. You want me to open, and it's hard for me to open. And then when I try to open it, you don't let me open. Tired of this.
Georgi's voice cracked before the first tear even hit his cheek. His hands were trembling, his words spilling out in half-broken sentences. I just want to try to have a conversation with you. The room went quiet, like even the air didn't want to move. Darcey stood there, arms folded, her face frozen in that signature mix of control and exhaustion. You could tell, this wasn't the first time they'd reached this point. But tonight, something felt final. He looked desperate, almost childlike, trying to pull her back with words that had lost their power months ago. His tone wasn't angry anymore, it was defeated. Darcey, though, didn't blink. No tears, no softness, nothing. Silence sharper than any insult. That's when it hit me. Maya rose from Starscoop US, watching this moment like everyone else. Was this even love anymore, or were they both addicted to the pain? If you've ever seen someone cry over a relationship that's already over, you know that look. The body's still fighting, but the soul has checked out. Welcome to Starscoop US, I'm Maya Rose, and today's episode is not your average 90-day fiancé meltdown. It's the kind of emotional car crash you can't look away from. If you've ever stayed too long in something that stopped feeling safe, you'll want to stay till the end. So hit that subscribe and tell me in the comments, do you think this was love or survival? Back in that moment, Georgi tried again. His words stumbled, heavy with regret, as if saying them out loud could rewrite their story. Darcey didn't buy it. She tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing, and hit him with ice-cold calm. You cannot trick me. Those 4 words cut deeper than any screaming match. You could see the humiliation wash over him. Every apology, every promise, every I'll do better turned into dust. It's strange watching someone cry on national TV. You want to feel bad, but part of you wonders how many times this same scene has played out when the cameras weren't there. Was Georgi crying for Darcey, or crying because he knew the world was watching his downfall? This wasn't a breakup anymore. It was a slow-motion collapse of 2 people pretending they still cared. Darcey finally grabbed her bag. No big speech, no dramatic music, no second glance. Just one deep breath and a quiet exit. And in that silence, Georgi's sobs filled the space she left behind. You could almost feel the echo bounce off the walls, the sound of a man realizing too late that love isn't supposed to feel like begging. But here's the thing, something about Darcey's silence didn't look peaceful. It looked practiced, like she'd been preparing for this ending long before the cameras rolled. And if that's true, then what we witnessed wasn't a sudden explosion. It was a slow burn finally reaching the point of no return. So now the question hangs heavy in the air. Was this the final goodbye? Or just another round in a love story that refuses to die? Rewinding to how it all began, you'd think their love story had everything. Passion, travel, designer outfits, and endless "we're working on it" speeches. But behind every filtered Instagram smile, there was tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Darcey wanted a fairy tale. Georgi wanted peace. And somehow, they both ended up fighting for control of the same dream. It started small. Family dinners where the energy shifted the moment Georgi walked in. Darcey's daughters didn't dislike him exactly, but you could sense the hesitation. He wasn't fully part of their world. They'd grown up watching their mom jump from heartbreak to heartbreak, so they protected her the way adult kids do, quietly, with eyes that said, "Not again." And for Georgi, that silent wall of judgment was hard to ignore. He wanted to belong, but belonging in Darcey's world came with terms and conditions. Then came the family pressure. Darcey's twin Stacey was always the mirror, literally and emotionally. If one sister got engaged, the other needed to too. If one cried, the other bled. The competition between them was unspoken, but constant. Georgi, stuck in the middle, became collateral damage in a family built on comparison. Every conversation turned into a scoreboard. Every trip home became a new test of loyalty. Now add money to the mix. Darcey liked things done big. Rings, dresses, houses, the whole fantasy. Georgi, on the other hand, was hustling to rebuild his life after his first marriage. He wasn't broke, but he wasn't keeping up with the Silva standard either. The unspoken message? Love was great, but luxury made it easier. And when love started cracking, money became both the weapon and the excuse. Insecurity crept in quietly. Darcey began checking, questioning, double-guessing. Georgi began retreating, staying silent to avoid fights that always found him anyway. It's wild how people can want each other so badly and still feel unseen. She wanted reassurance. He wanted calm, but their needs canceled each other out. You could almost feel years of resentment surface in one short sentence. "You cannot trick me." Their fights became repetitive reruns. Darcey accusing him of hiding something, Georgi insisting he was misunderstood. At one point, even fans could predict the rhythm. She'd confront, he'd deny, she'd cry, he'd comfort, then they'd reset until the next explosion. It was like emotional déjà vu with better lighting, and yet, both of them had a point. Darcey had every reason to be guarded. She'd been humiliated on national TV before. Georgi had every reason to feel trapped. His mistakes were amplified under a microscope. That's what made it sad. Neither one was the villain. They were simply incompatible people trying to win a war where love was the casualty. Still, there were moments of humor in the chaos. Like when Darcey lectured him about trust while scrolling through his phone mid-argument. Or when Georgi said he needed space and she followed him to the next room. It was messy, yes, but painfully human. You couldn't even stay mad watching them. You just shook your head and thought, yep, that's them, the irony. They both wanted the same thing, security. But her version meant control, and his meant freedom. Those two things rarely coexist under one roof. Over time, the arguments blurred into noise. Family tension, money, control, it all piled up. And by the time they realized how far they'd drifted, the bridge between them was already burning. You could see it in his eyes during that final scene. He wasn't angry. He was tired. And she, for once, looked scared. Not of losing him, but of admitting she might be the reason. But the breaking point wasn't a scream or a betrayal. It was quieter, colder, and far more personal. It came the moment Georgi looked her dead in the eye and said she was tricking him. That single accusation flipped everything upside down, and from that second on, nothing between them would ever be the same. The cameras rolled, and the chaos hit like a tidal wave. Georgi's shoulders were hunched, his voice trembling as he tried to reach her one last time. "I just want us to talk, please." His words were barely audible over the crackle of tension in the room. Darcey didn't move. Not a flicker of an eyelid, not a step closer, nothing. Her posture screamed frozen determination, like she had rehearsed this exit 1,000 times in front of the mirror. Every second she stayed silent, the air grew heavier, and Georgi's face turned red, not from anger, but from desperation. He took a shaky breath and reached out, almost pleading, and you could see the panic in his eyes. Darcey's gaze didn't soften. Instead, it sharpened. The kind of look that tells you she's already calculated the next move. You could almost feel her thinking, "I've been here before. I know exactly how this ends." Georgi's tears streamed freely now, each one carrying months of frustration, shame, and heartbreak. He wasn't putting on a show. This was raw, unfiltered pain, and the cameras caught it all. As a viewer, it was impossible to look away. You felt torn. Part of you wanted to hug him, to tell him it wasn't the end, but another part of you knew the truth. They weren't just fighting. They were dismantling the foundation of everything they once claimed to love. Watching them, I, Maya Rose from Starscoop US, couldn't help but question. Were they toxic, or were they simply incompatible people who refused to quit? Either way, it was mesmerizing in its discomfort. Online, fans exploded in real time. Team Darcey called Georgi dramatic, fragile, too sensitive. Team Georgi accused Darcey of being cold, calculating, unfeeling. The comment sections were divided into battlefields, each side armed with clips, quotes, and memes. Yet the common denominator, toxicity. Their fights had become a spectacle, almost a brand. Every episode reminded viewers that when these two were together, peace was never an option. Their dysfunction was the main character, and both Darcey and Georgi were trapped in its lead roles. The body language alone was telling. Darcey's crossed arms, the slight tilt of her chin, the way she avoided his eyes. Georgi's trembling hands, the way he rubbed his forehead, the way his chest heaved with silent sobs. Unspoken words hung in the space between them, filling the room louder than any argument could. You didn't need dialogue to understand that years of resentment, fear, and mistrust had metastasized into this one catastrophic moment. And still, amidst the heartbreak, there were flashes of absurdity. Like when Georgi tried to list reasons she should stay, and she responded with a calm, almost bored stare. The contrast between his desperation and her composure made the tension unbearable. It was like watching a storm slowly rip a house apart. You couldn't intervene. You couldn't fix it. You just had to sit there and witness it collapse. Then came the line that flipped everything on its head. Darcey's voice cut through the air, calm but deadly. "We should just sign those divorce papers and call it a day." When Darcey finally said they should sign those divorce papers, you could almost hear the sound of every fan's jaw hitting the floor. It wasn't dramatic music or a shocking twist that made it so potent. It was the sheer finality in her tone, the kind of clarity that comes from a lifetime of calculated patience. Georgi's face fell, his tears now mixed with disbelief. He had pleaded, he had cried, he had tried to negotiate emotions, and in one sentence she removed any possibility of repair. Fans were left speechless. Some celebrated Darcey's decisiveness. Others mourned Georgi's heartbreak. But the one thing everyone agreed on, this was not just another argument. It was the public explosion that crystallized years of tension into a single, unforgettable moment. And yet, even as the cameras cut, the question lingered in the air. Was this truly the end? Or was it just the beginning of their spiral? An ending that would feed the drama, the gossip, and the unending commentary that made their story irresistible to millions. Darcey walked out, and the room seemed to shrink. One moment it was packed with tension, the next it felt empty, except for Georgi, slumped on the couch, staring at nothing. He didn't move. He couldn't. The kind of exhaustion that follows not just tears, but the weight of years of frustration. Pride, pain, and disappointment all collided in his chest, leaving a hollow ache that no apology could fix. Family reactions started pouring in almost immediately. Darcey's daughters reportedly stayed in their rooms, whispering about what had just happened. Friends of Georgi expressed sympathy, some bewilderment, and a hint of frustration. How did it come to this again? Each side had people rooting for them, judging them, and secretly hoping for a resolution that would never come. Pride became a barrier no one could scale. Both wanted to be right, and in that fight, right and love were no longer compatible. Even online, the fallout was spectacular. Clips of Georgi's breakdown and Darcey's cold exit circulated, dissected, and analyzed. Commenters debated who was the villain, who was the victim, who was just tired of pretending. And as always, the world watched like spectators at a slow-motion disaster. Only in 90 Day Fiancé could tears trend faster than truth. One minute you're feeling empathy, the next you're cringing, the next you're laughing at the absurdity of watching real pain become entertainment. The isolation was tangible. Georgi didn't just lose a partner. He lost the stability of shared routines, the comfort of someone to argue with and forgive, the familiarity of life together, even if it had been toxic. Darcey, on the other hand, had left the room but carried the emotional residue with her, like a storm cloud hovering over her own freedom. Both were trapped in their respective pain, unable to reach each other even if they wanted to. There's something harsh about watching a public breakup. Privacy doesn't exist. Every nuance, every gesture, every tear becomes evidence, and opinions are rendered as facts. Watching Georgi struggle, you feel empathy, but it's mixed with discomfort, because you know millions are judging his mistakes in real time. You see Darcey's calculated distance, and suddenly the human becomes a headline. It's exhausting for everyone involved, but the cameras don't care. They just keep rolling. The cameras stopped rolling, but the real drama had just started. For Georgi, the isolation magnified every insecurity, every lingering doubt. Friends tried to console him, but there's only so much an outsider can do when the person you loved leaves and the world refuses to look away. For Darcey, the exit gave her temporary control, but control never comes without consequences. Even those closest to her were stunned, not by the breakup itself, but by the clarity and decisiveness in her actions. The irony of it all is almost laughable if it weren't so painful. A room once full of negotiation and emotional bargaining was now empty, except for silence that was louder than any argument. The power plays, the prideful refusals, the months of passive-aggressive behavior all crystallized in that one exit. And the aftershock didn't stop in the house. Social media exploded, friends whispered, family gossiped, and the ripple effect spread further than either of them could have anticipated. But just when it seemed like the aftermath was settling into a familiar rhythm of gossip and speculation, Darcey made a move that nobody saw coming. Not her daughters, not her friends, and certainly not Georgi. Whatever she did next changed the narrative entirely and left everyone questioning who was truly in control. And as the audience, you're left on edge wondering, did she act out of spite? Survival or something else entirely? The fallout was supposed to be predictable, but Darcey had other plans. Time passed, and the chaos of their public meltdown slowly began to settle, but it didn't mean the hurt disappeared. Georgi tried to rebuild himself in the glare of social media. Every post, every story, every confession felt like a lifeline, proof that he was still human, still capable of emotion. His vulnerability was on full display, not for sympathy, but as a way to reclaim control over his own narrative. He spoke openly about mistakes, regret, and heartbreak, and for the first time, he seemed less like a man trying to convince someone to stay, and more like someone convincing himself he deserved better. Darcey, meanwhile, embraced independence like it was a skill she had been waiting to master. She focused on her routines, her daughters, and her own peace, carefully separating her identity from the chaos of their relationship. She didn't flaunt her freedom. It wasn't about victory. It was about claiming boundaries, about understanding that self-respect sometimes requires distance. Watching her in this phase, you could sense the shift from being reactive to being deliberate. She wasn't running from pain. She was running toward clarity. Every breakup teaches one rule. If love keeps breaking you, it's not love anymore. Both of them started to redefine what happiness looked like. Georgi found moments of laughter, small victories, and even unexpected support from fans who had once judged him harshly. Darcey's moments were quieter, more private, but no less significant. She laughed without fear of judgment, made choices without guilt, and reclaimed spaces in her life that had long been dominated by conflict. They weren't getting back together, and they weren't pretending they could. This wasn't about reconciliation. This was about accountability, self-respect, and understanding that sometimes love doesn't mean holding on. It's hard to watch someone walk away and not feel relief mixed with grief. You hope for closure, but often it comes in fragments. Georgi learned it in public, in posts and interviews, in candid moments of honesty. Darcey learned it in quiet reflection, in boundaries she wouldn't compromise, and in the subtle joy of control over her own life. Both taught viewers an unspoken lesson. Love sometimes isn't about fighting harder. It's about knowing when to stop. There were moments that felt almost like redemption. Georgi, while publicly emotional, started advocating for understanding, for empathy, and for owning one's mistakes. Darcey, through her calm and focused demeanor, reminded everyone that strength often looks quiet, unassuming, and unapologetic. They were both growing, not together, but in parallel. That's what made it fascinating and painful at the same time. And just when it seemed that the storm had passed, that the dust had settled and some peace had been restored, whispers started circulating. Rumors about new conflicts, about old secrets resurfacing, about moments neither Georgi nor Darcey could fully control. Social media buzzed, fans speculated, and suddenly the delicate balance of progress felt precarious. Because right when peace seemed possible, another rumor surfaced, threatening to pull them back into the cycle of tension they had just begun to escape. The lesson here isn't simple. Walking away doesn't erase love or heartbreak. It doesn't fix mistakes. But it does create space. Space to breathe, to reflect, and to finally respect yourself enough to stop being hurt over and over. And as viewers, we're left on edge, knowing that in the world of 90 Day Fiancé, no peace lasts forever. Even after the dust had settled, TLC wasn't done with Georgi and Darcey. The network smelled content gold in every tear, every argument, and every awkward silence. Rumors of a spin-off started circulating almost immediately. Fans debated whether it would be a healing journey or just another chance to watch them implode on camera. Social media buzzed with theories, opinions, and outright speculation. Everyone had a side, and everyone wanted to see how far the drama could stretch. The couple had become both protagonists and entertainment, a reminder that in reality TV, heartbreak isn't just personal, it's profitable. The tension between authenticity and performance became impossible to ignore. Were Georgi's confessions on Instagram a genuine attempt at vulnerability or calculated moves to build sympathy? Was Darcey's newfound independence a real moment of self-respect or a storyline crafted to show growth? Watching them, it's hard not to question what is real and what is curated. Sometimes the line blurs, and yet the emotions are tangible. Even if part of the heartbreak is packaged for viewers, the pain, frustration, and longing are very real for the people living it. Fans started taking sides again. Some accused the network of exploiting them. Others celebrated the spin-off as a chance to witness honesty in the face of chaos. Meanwhile, Georgi and Darcey continued to navigate their public personas and private emotions. They were stuck between healing and hustling, between wanting closure and knowing cameras were always rolling. You could see it in Georgi's eyes during interviews. The exhaustion, the self-reflection, the subtle hope that maybe this time things could be different. And Darcey, ever composed, gave glimpses of someone reclaiming her life on her own terms, quietly setting boundaries without needing anyone's approval. Through all this, the spin-off became less about conflict and more about self-worth. Watching them separately, you saw the lessons crystallize. Vulnerability doesn't equal weakness, boundaries are essential, and sometimes walking away is the bravest thing you can do. The cameras captured it all, the frustration, the small triumphs, the moments of self-acceptance. It reminded viewers that relationships, no matter how messy, always carry lessons if you're willing to pay attention. And the final emotional payoff wasn't reconciliation, dramatic as it would have been, but acceptance. Acceptance that some people aren't meant to grow together, that love sometimes ends because it's time, and that closure isn't always a conversation, it's internal. Both Georgi and Darcey, in their own ways, were learning to find value in themselves outside of each other. Sometimes, closure doesn't come from the other person. It comes from finally believing what they showed you the first time. The spin-off hype faded slightly as fans realized it wasn't about reigniting romance. It was about personal journeys. Watching Georgi and Darcey separately, you felt the weight of growth, self-awareness, and the power of choosing yourself over someone else's version of love. For viewers, it was a lesson in empathy, a reminder of human complexity, and a sneak peek into how fragile and public modern relationships can become under the reality TV microscope. Even after the cameras paused, the emotional lessons lingered, proving that heartbreak doesn't need to be dramatic to be transformative, and that self-respect often shines brightest when the world is watching. Looking back, the story of Georgi and Darcey is a whirlwind of tears. Control, pride, and relentless pressure. Every heated exchange, every desperate plea, every cold exit tells a story not just of a relationship breaking, but of two humans navigating expectations they could never fully meet. Darcey's need for structure and boundaries collided with Georgi's yearning for peace and acceptance, and the friction was unavoidable. The cameras captured their most vulnerable moments, but what they didn't capture, what only those living it could feel, was the emotional weight behind each word. Each glance, each silence. They were messy, yes. Frustrating, yes. But also undeniably real. They weren't villains in a scripted drama. They were people who loved hard, failed differently, and sometimes hurt the ones they cared about most in the process. Georgi's vulnerability was palpable, a mix of regret and longing that made you want to reach through the screen. Darcey's composure wasn't coldness. It was survival, the armor she had honed over years of disappointment and scrutiny. Watching them, it's impossible not to feel empathy, even as you shake your head at choices that seem avoidable in hindsight. The public scrutiny amplified everything. Fans dissected every tear, every exit, every glance. Social media became a parallel stage, judging, celebrating, and criticizing all at once. And yet, despite the chaos, both of them showed growth. Georgi began owning his mistakes and acknowledging the lessons of heartbreak. Darcey reasserted her independence, proving that self-respect can sometimes be louder than words. Their story didn't conclude with fireworks or reconciliation. It concluded with subtle human evolution, a lesson in accepting what cannot be changed. Love stories don't always end with closure. Sometimes they end with a camera fading to black and millions of questions left open. And as we sit here reflecting, one thing is clear. Both of them loved intensely, both failed spectacularly, and both emerged with something worth keeping. The understanding that some battles aren't meant to be won together. Watching Georgi and Darcey navigate this minefield reminds us how complicated love can be, especially when it's made public. It also shows that accountability, empathy, and self-respect aren't mutually exclusive. They can coexist, even amid heartbreak. But of course, reality TV never lets the story rest too long. While Georgi and Darcey work on themselves, the drama continues elsewhere. Next up, fans are buzzing about Jovi and Andrei, whose explosive confrontation is already creating waves online. If Georgi and Darcey's story taught us anything, it's that nothing in the 90-day Fiancé world is ever truly over, and the next twist is always just around the corner. As viewers, we're left with questions, emotions, and lessons. Who will grow? Who will fall? And who will surprise us the most? That's what keeps us coming back, because in this world, love is messy, loyalty is tested, and every ending is just a new beginning waiting to unfold.